So that just further proves how terrible of a person I am. While I didn't forget about Mother's Day, I did forget that I'm supposed to feed my wife on Mother's Day. Didn't want to go to the restaurant, so I just had to go pick up the food, but of course I ordered it like 30 minutes before I'm supposed to do this. So sorry for being late, guys. We're here now. So this is going to be the final Who the Fuck Are You with Yee-Min Lin, because we're just over 2 weeks away, or just over a week away from the election. I'll have him on now, and we'll talk. And then later on at 8, as long as I don't mess that up. Oh yeah, see? I got the flowers. I got the flowers, Yee. Don't start with me with this. Yes. I don't know if it's your connection or my connection is dipping out. But so happy Mother's Day. You know, you seem very ladylike today. Got your makeup on and everything.
All for you, Bill.
Oh, there you go. All right, man. So I'm just trying to refix my camera here. So all right. So now I'm done looking at myself. All right. So I got questions for you. I accidentally, on purpose, I guess, led off each of the other discussions by asking about their work history. You have quite an extensive work history, but tell me a little bit about your CRO experience in USPSA.
First off, I want to start off by thanking you for taking the time, especially on Mother's Day, to spend some time with me to talk about the presidential campaign. So we'll go from here. So I became an RO in 2015. Since then, I found the easiest way to attend matches on a limited budget was to basically work them. So since 2015, I've probably worked 42 major matches across the United States, everything from being an RO to a CRO to range master. So I've worked Area 6 a couple times, worked Area 8 a couple times. I think that's where we first met. I've worked nationals a number of times, everything from classic to, limited carry optics. If I think about the only nats I haven't worked as multi-gun nats, and I think two-gun nats.
So you range mastered. Where did you range master?
I served as a range master for a co-range master 2 years at Roadrunner. So once with Greg Vaughn back in 2019, and then once again with Carl Schmidt last year, 2020. I also served as a range master for. We had basically a production single stack match up at Linden Competitive Shooting Club. So I served as a range master there. I served as an interim range master for another match when the existing range master had a family emergency to take care of, and the California. Well, there's a level 2 match that's supposed to be happening down at Pyru sometime this year, and I'm notionally slated to be the range master for that as well.
Well, awesome. So I mean, that's quite a bit of experience, and I mean, you've got to be familiar with the rules to even play CRO, but to jump on the range as a range master, you've got to be pretty confident in your knowledge and the ability to look it up. So good for you. I've done it a few times myself. It's a different experience than just being a CRO. I promise you that.
Yeah, just a little bit. It's really just growing the bigger picture, right? So, I mean, you and I were both in the military, so it's going from being an entry level soldier to being a squad leader to being a platoon sergeant, so on and so forth. It's just you're kind of taking what you already know and you're just growing it to a bigger picture.
Right. So you're already the president of your home club, is that right?
I did serve as the president for my home club. So Richard Rod Gun Club, we have the bylaws stipulate that you're term limited to 2 consecutive terms. So I served as 2 consecutive terms. I termed out last year. I'm still on the board as past president. It's a position that we have at our club that allows for continuity, historical continuity, experience. Hey, this is what it was like when I was president, and you're able to school up the board and the rest of and the president in what happened when you were around, so that they know what decisions to make in case something comes up again.
So is that what happened? You're like, well, I'm bored with being I can't be president of my home club, so let's go be president of the next thing up.
No, it certainly was about being any boredom like that. That's something I've sort of thought about being president of USPSA really about maybe 3 years ago. Just I love the people, the membership, the clubs that I've gone to. We have a great community, and I've always looked forward to serving them, in every step of the way as an RM, CRO, even as a range master. And so I look at the next step to be able to serve and represent the membership.
Okay. So you speak in length pretty much everything that I've read about you about the volunteers of the sport and promoting the volunteers of the sport. I have a question because you've gone to a lot of matches. Have you seen a deviation from that in some of the newer shooters coming into the sport? And if so, what do you think can be done about that?
I think there really isn't a deviation. It's really you don't know what you don't know, right? So if at my home club, Richmond Rod and Gun Club, that's something that starts from a very early on in someone's experience where you show up at USPSA, we introduce them to the rules of the game, and then we also mentor and teach them in terms of, okay, the game is not just about shooting, it's also about volunteer and participation. So we make it a very welcoming environment to say, hey, even if all you can do is swing a hammer, we welcome your approach. And that's something I've seen at a number of other clubs where your introduction to the sport is not just the game and how fun it can be, but also the responsibility that we have as members to ensure that the game continues on. So I think the easiest way to go about promoting that is really to lead by example. You be the example that you want your members to be, and that's something I've tried to follow. At any major match that I work, you take that extra minute to say, hey, these are some of the things that can help you be more effective as an RO. These are some of the things that can help you be more effective at designing stages, so on and so forth. And it's just an education process. And the more people that we as individual members can show and lead by example, then naturally people will volunteer and come along.
Well, I guess the question is more about a lot of the newer shooters come in and a lot of the younger crowd is well, I paid my $20 for the service of the match, and I don't show up early to help staple a target. I'm not helping hold the timer. Breakdown is all y'all's problem. Do you see any potential to try to swing some of that? How do you think that would go?
I think just being very patient with them and showing them that the matches can't happen without your support. And so if you want to be able to have a match that occurs, we're not asking for people to be out there all the time. I'm sure you've seen it with the matches that you run. I've certainly experienced it on my end where you just have those moments where you go, you know what, I'm really tired of doing this. And, you might take a match or two off where you're not really doing anything to help. And then you come back right in and help, the next match over. So you can always set that standard, at something that is an offer you can't refuse. Hey, just come out for one match, right? Just come out for one match. And then it allows them, you give them a reason to come out. Hey, you can see what the challenges are in creating these stages. Some of these younger shooters who might come in and say, hey, I think this stage is not very good, or, why is this stage particularly potato? That once you show them what goes on behind the curtain, you're giving them a vested reason to say, hey, if you volunteer and you give us a little bit of your time every so often, then you can shape the stages and the match in a way that you feel is more appropriate to your skill level. So, that volunteer pays off dividends when you go, hey, now I can see what goes into a stage and why stages are the way they are. I want to be able to design good stages. I want to be able to have a match that's worth my time and money. Well, come on, help us out.
Yeah. Okay. So in the Q&A, you mentioned the president's role is establishing a long-term vision for the org. I didn't pick up a whole lot of detail on what your vision is. Can you kind of explain what your long-term vision for the org is?
So I believe the long-term vision is a couple of points. One is to create a welcoming community that supports the Second Amendment, that gives a place for us to be able to test our skills and to get better with firearms handling and accuracy and fundamentals. as well as ensuring that it's always a fun, competitive environment. So we when we think about USPSA, we normally talk about how competitive it is, the sport, being able to go fast and don't suck, to use your parlance. But at the same time, I think we can do a better job of presenting is also the social aspect. That's certainly something I've seen at matches across the country where we all start because we want to get better at shooting, but we stay because we meet such great people, people that are willing to take time out of the weekends, come, and we spend a little bit of time shooting, and we spend a lot of time talking and pacing and resetting. And that social community is something I'd really like for us to be able to build upon as a way to grow the sport. We understand this is a disposable income sport. Not everybody necessarily has the time or the money to be able to go shoot every weekend. I certainly do, but we're always ready and waiting for you to come back when the time permits. And that social element is very important.
So your vision is to keep the culture and as far as the camaraderie and getting people to come out. And what do you think from the top down? What do you think from the president's role you can do to help support that?
So I think the easiest way is to be the example you want everybody else to be. So you lead by example. I'll be the first. I'll be out there helping to build stages. I'll work the matches. That is not going to change regardless of if I am elected to the presidency or if not. You set the example that you want others to follow, and hopefully that will be enough for everyone to understand and come along.
Well, sounds like a very inexpensive way of doing it. There's no money being spent to set a good example, is there? That's awesome. So in the let's see, the three areas that need addressing was one of the Q&A questions. So I'm trying to get some more detail about you want to consolidate all of the match director experience into a single resource. What does that resource look like? Is that
well, I think I remember you started something like that where you talk about best MD practices. I think that's a great start, and I really appreciate you taking the time and effort to kind of reach out to the other resources out there. Having some kind of consolidated resource, it could be something that's integrated within the club management page. So you log into the club management page, and not only is there the opportunity for you to be able to renew your club fees, but there's also a section that says, best practices. I know the terminology can be variable, center of excellence, however you want to call it, but some kind of place on the website. Let's call it at the club contact page, club management page, where you can say, okay, if I want to know how to run a club match, I click on this link, and it provides me with essentially a blueprint, whether you call it a franchise document or something that tells you what the things you need to consider. When we start looking at major matches, that's obviously something that might take a little bit of a different spin. So somebody who maybe files their Form C and says, hey, I want to run a major match, you get an email that says, hey, click on this link, and these are some of the considerations and planning that you might want to think about in terms of ensuring that your major match is a success.
Now, long before my time, apparently, there used to be a match directing seminar almost. I think it was a requirement, wasn't it?
I don't remember if it was a requirement. That certainly, that really highlights kind of the need to have some kind of historical reference. But I think if I remember correctly, it was called the Tournament Director Seminar, or something very similar to the Range Master program, where if you wanted to run a major match, it was a course that essentially taught you how to run a major match effectively.
So we have like two views right now. We've got two extremes right now. Either you had to take a class to be a match director, or right now you can just say, hey, I'm a match director. And are you looking for a middle ground, or do you think you're looking to bring back some kind of seminar?
I don't necessarily believe that it's something that we should force onto match directors. It's really more something about providing the information. The information is available should you choose to use it, but we're at this point, USPSA is fairly laissez-faire with anything below the area matches, right? So the area directors are responsible for the area matches, as the national organization is responsible for nationals. But we don't necessarily say, hey, this is the specific standard we want you to function if you want to run a level 2 match. For now, I think just providing that information and making it available so that if a match director chooses to use that information and it helps them in able to run a major match, I think that would be a great start.
Okay. One of the, let's see, the second point on the areas that need addressing was you spoke about getting mixed messages from the national level. I'm assuming that means the board. And what do you mean by that?
So I think when we talk about mixed messaging, it's not so much the board or any one particular individual, sending a confusing message. I think it's just having a unified message that's presented to the membership in general. So when most of the time, with the memes that you see and some of the things I see on social media, we're really looking at, okay, well, I heard this from here and somebody else heard it from someone else. And you're trying to basically play a game of telephone tag to figure out what the actual truth is. So I know that we routinely get emails from USPSA. I think that's a really good place to start. But just having even something as simple as Franklin Delano Roosevelt's old fireside chats, right? Something like this, where you maybe spend 5 to 10 minutes and just update the membership. Hey, this week this is what USPSA is looking at. We're getting prepared for two Classic Nationals coming up in 2 weeks. Here are some of the current issues that the organization and the membership and the board are looking at. This is what we'll address in the next board meeting. Just that kind of regular information flow, so that way the membership, gets updates, and so that when they hear something, for example, like I know there's been some discussion about finances. It's not necessarily something that comes out of the blue. It's hey, the economy has been difficult, costs have gone up, and we understand that right now we have a fixed revenue stream. So in order for us to be able to balance our fixed revenue stream with our increasing costs, we have to consider some options. It's not necessarily saying that we are going to implement those options, but at least we're giving you a heads up before you see the meeting minutes that shows, wait, why are we suddenly talking about raising membership fees? And that sort of context, I think, is important for the organization to provide, so that way we're not leaving the membership up to their own devices and their interpretation to figure out what's really going on.
Well, I mean, you brought up the membership fees and the discussion that the board had recently about raising dues and activity fees. I'm not asking you for like yay or nay, Yee. I'm like, well, you seem like you're not against it, but you're not convinced.
I think it's really it's one avenue of approach that you have to look at. So if we look at the financial statements for the organization, you can identify that the primary revenue source for USPSA is from the membership fees. Now, activity fees, again, if I understand it historically, the activity fees were implemented to be able to subsidize the cost for nationals. So we're really looking at two different approaches here. So one is, how do we continue to be able to support nationals without necessarily, dipping into the rainy day fund, so to speak. And then the membership fees, which are the primary revenue for the organization to be able to provide services to the membership. What is, what is the right approach? Do we look at raising membership fees so that we can continue to provide the same level of services that we currently provide for the organization? Do we potentially raise membership fees so that we can improve the level of services? Or do we look outside of membership fees and activity fees and go, is there a revenue source that's, we haven't necessarily thought about that could help make up the difference in what the expenditures are? So it's without necessarily having access to the financials, those are the things that would go in my head in considering, okay, what are the different constraints that we're working with?
Well, I mean, at this point, you would be advising or having discussions with the managing director about the budget and then voting on it as a member as the president of the board. It's not like you could just go in and be like, we're doing this, let's raise it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And certainly we would, I know well enough to be able to read financial statements, but I'm not a financial person by trade. So, we would certainly want to, get some subject matter experts to kind of advise us on on the appropriate financial path moving forward. Get all the information and make an educated quantitative decision.
Sure. So, I mean, we've already discussed this a little bit on a previous question, but it's the last one of the three things that need to be addressing. You mentioned needing to foster volunteers and basically, it looks like you're trying to get more people on the range that are trained and actually participating. I mean, other than I'm re-asking a question almost, but other than the by example, is there not anything else you think could be done from the top down?
I think there was a topic that was brought up in some previous live streams about getting people RO certified, and I know, where we live, there is a critical mass of competitive shooters that makes it relatively easy for those to be able to take an RO class whenever you want. Again, that is something very specific to the areas that we live. For my club, we can basically fill an RO or a CRO class any time of the year if we so choose. We have that much of a volunteer base. But if you go to certain other sections in the states where the population density doesn't support that, how do we reach out to those people and give them the opportunity to get those certifications done? So that, there are some discussions about, well, do we make something online training or whatnot? And that is certainly not something that would be done in a vacuum. That would be a topic of discussion with NRI, along with the assistant DNRIs, to see what is something that would satisfy their requirements, while also making it so that competitors and members who want to be RO certified don't necessarily have to make a significant financial outlay. And that is certainly something that we would have to consider with the price of gas and, approaching double-digit inflation. I mean, the economy is not great. So, we want people to be RO certified. So let's take a look and see, what works for the organization as well as the membership to make it a little bit easier for them to make that happen.
Okay. You had mentioned that you're looking to improve, like acquiring new members, retaining members. How do you think we can retain members?
So that's without necessarily having data on why members leave. I think that's not the easiest question to answer. Certainly, I talked about in the beginning how this is a disposable income sport. It costs us a fair amount of time, gas money to just be able to shoot on the weekends, and that's simply from a casual participant perspective, not necessarily those of us who try to shoot 30,000 rounds a year. So certainly having some kind of exit survey where we ask a member, why are you not renewing your membership? Why are you leaving? That would give us a solid data point to go, okay, are we losing members because of something that the organization is doing, or are we losing members because it's just a bad economic cycle and people have to choose where to spend their disposable income, and USPSA is not on that list. As far as attracting new members, what I've commonly seen is that people end up joining the sport because they had a friend tell them, either at a range or somewhere else, that, hey, you should try this USPSA sport. So for better or for worse, we are certainly in a social media age. I would certainly like for us to be able to better utilize social media just to get eyes onto the sport, and that way direct them to a match that's available. But even if we attract all these members, you still have the challenge of, well, where do they go shoot? So I know certainly where you're out in the Delaware area, the matches are probably pretty close to capacity. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, when the weather's nice.
Right. So even if we attract all these new members, we still need the clubs to be able to support having those members with a place to shoot. So certainly another aspect of attracting members is also giving people a case to actually run matches. And we've both done that. And, everybody starts off and says, hey, I want to run a match. And then you get started a year later and you go, wow, this is a lot more work than I expected.
Well, I guess the catch-22 here is people are paying $40 a year that are casual shooters. and they don't have to pay $40 a year to participate at their local clubs if they're not going to major matches. So if they're not going to major matches, what services do we offer for that year of $40?
Well, you get Frontside Magazine. That is one service, and you also have the ability to have a say within what the organization is doing. So it gives you access to the members only area. It allows you to vote on relevant issues. It gives you a little bit of credibility when you say, hey, I think, let's just take a topic of, I believe that major power factor should be lowered. As a member, there's a little bit more credence to your argument when you say, hey, I actually have some skin in the game.
Right. Okay. And then there's the classification system in the app. Okay.
Right.
So let's see, what else do I got here? So it seemed like I couldn't understand exactly where your stance was, but it looked like you might have thought we could do better for our social media marketing.
As far as social media, I think it's just in terms of creating a relevant message that reaches the audience, not just internally within USPSA, but also externally. So that being, I want to couch that by saying, doing social media is certainly a full-time job in and of itself. And while I understand there are concerns with how our social media is running so far, understand that the folks that are managing it right now, that is not their only job. They have to deal with a host of other issues within the organization. And so I can certainly understand that, that's something that may not necessarily have our best foot forward. And that's not because we don't want to put our best foot forward. It's just something that gets dropped. So, what I would use as a standard is, let's look at some of the more popular Second Amendment YouTube channels out there. What is it that makes their content engaging? How is it that they're able to get subscriptions? How is it that they're able to get lots of likes? And thinking about how we can structure our social media campaign to reflect that. So we understand that your typical person has an attention span of 30 seconds to a minute. So let's think about, okay, if I wanted to tell somebody about USPSA within 30 seconds, what would that look like? What would that look like if somebody only had 30 seconds to a minute to watch a video before they should go to their first match? Oh my gosh, what am I supposed to do? Not necessarily something where I go, hey, let's look at a website, they click and read and it goes in one out the other. But if they have a visual image of go, okay, at my first match, as long as I bring this, I will be okay, then, that's the short type of short stuff, that's short imaging, short social media content that is memorable and spreads word of mouth, which is really how most of us got into the sport.
Yep. It was a magazine that baited me in. Stupid magazine. I don't even know what I would be doing with all my free time right now. So when you were talking about the Nationals, one of the things you brought up that it was different from anything I've heard anybody say anything about was you would like to take into consideration families that are traveling with the competitors.
So I really believe that, most of us that are in the sport, we kind of rely on the goodwill of our family and support of our families to be able to participate. I mean, you're basically saying, hey, this is one weekend out of the year, sometimes multiple weekends, where I'm going to not be home. And that can only go so far. I draw on my own experience. So the first Nationals I went to was in Barrie, Illinois. And the only reason why I went there is because there was a slot that came up. And the following weekend, I was supposed to be in Disney World with my family. And so my wife at the time, she basically said, well, I will allow you to go to Production Nationals, but the only way you can go is if you take one of our sons. So I had one son that was 3 and another that was 5 at the time. So my first Nationals I went to, I was dragging along my 3-year-old son who had never been to the range before. And Barrie, Illinois, is a beautiful location. And it was a challenge, pushing around a stroller with all my gun stuff and all the kid stuff. And my son doesn't really understand the concept of eyes and ears. So I'm trying to put his eyes on. He's like, I can't see my iPad. He takes his glasses off, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to turn you in the other direction, so that way, if anything happens, you're not going to see that. And uh, and it really highlights something I talked about with the community, because the folks at the range in Barrie, they were so kind. I had some tactical earmuffs, and they were too big, and one of the range staff, had some kid size ear protection, and she loaned that to us for us to use. I had to shoot. There was a friend of mine that somebody I hadn't known there, and his wife was traveling with him, and she took the time out of her schedule not only to take pictures of the squad while we were shooting, but also to watch after my son. And so that, I think that's something that we really need to think about is, our ability to participate at nationals is not just us as individuals, but we should really also account for uh, the family members and our loved ones to enable us to be able to go to begin with. And so if there's something for them to be able to do, then nationals doesn't just become a you and me thing. It becomes an our thing. Hey, let's all go to nationals together. These are some of the things that your kids and your spouse can do, or your friends and your family, as well as, hey, I'm out here at the range shooting all the time.
Yeah. No, I'm definitely at the range shooting all the time.
We both are.
I get myself in trouble all the time. Everybody's like, "Oh, I want to go to the range." I was like, "Well, just tell me when." I'm always looking for an excuse to go. Oh, I have to go this time. Maybe somebody wants to be trained. So let's talk about IPSC and the USPSA relationship with IPSC. So part of the president's role is going to be maintaining that and being what was the term like on their
regional
board.
Director.
That's the
Regional
one,
director.
Right.
So if I remember correctly, the USPSA is actually on the IPSC Executive Council. So the analogy I would use is that USPSA's participation in IPSC is very similar to what the United States relationship is with the United Nations. And I totally understand that there are members out there that may have very different opinions about our participation in the United Nations. But if you look at at USPSA, we are still one of the largest regions. We still have a very powerful voice within IPSC. If you just look at carry optics, Phil Strader started carry optics in USPSA, and that was something that IPSC adopted. So we have a responsibility to represent the country in an international sport. We were one of the founding members, and it has grown to a level that I think it's important for us to remain involved.
Do you think the relationship is strained as it is?
Well, just like anything else in international relations, relationships always go in a cyclical basis. Sometimes, we can be best friends. If you take a look at Russia, we were best friends with Russia, and now we're not best friends with Russia. So that sort of relationship is something that, it can always go in a cyclical manner. Just because something is strained doesn't necessarily mean it's irreparable. And so, you can always come back, maybe get some Mother's Day flowers and some Applebee's and say, hey, can we still be friends? So it's a work in progress. I think that's something that we can still work on to improve our relationships if they were in a strained position.
Sure. Okay. All right. So we talked about the board and your view of like the fireside briefs to let people know what's going on within the organization. There's been a lot of questions about whether or not we should be live streaming board meetings or pre-recording them was the last suggestion. So recording them. What do you think about that? Do you think that's necessary?
So if we look at the fundamental premise that communication with the membership is really what is driving the need for the ask for transparency, I think there's ways that we can communicate with the membership and give them that transparency that they ask for without necessarily putting us in a position where we are unable to have honest discussions as board members on sensitive corporate topics. So I understand there's the issue of going into executive session all the time. A board meeting is about corporate business, and there are certainly contractual issues that we talk about that would be a challenge to do so if the meetings were live streamed. But I think we can fulfill the transparency the transparency needs of the membership without necessarily going into a live stream format.
Okay, that's a fair answer. And you were already talking about addressing that with your fireside thing, so it was a little redundant there. And we already talked about the budget, so I don't have to go back to that, do I? Let's see. So this is one of the hardest things about you, my friend. Your social media is so quiet. You're so polite. It's like, how is a meme page supposed to survive your presidency? Like, you're killing me, man. There's no drama. I don't know what to do with you.
Uh, please direct all things to Baby Yoda.
I just
I'm sure I'm going to come up with enough things should a presidency occur that you'll be able to certainly lob some memes my way.
Man, I was scrolling through your social media. I was trying to find like your point of view on the current board administration because there's pretty much everybody else has an opinion there. And I didn't get any of that out of your social media. Didn't get any of that out of your Q&A. It doesn't seem like you really have any strife with the board. Is that pretty accurate?
I believe that any sort of concerns that one would have, that's really something that should be dealt with politely and professionally in an offline manner rather than airing out your dirty laundry, so to speak.
Well, that's very different. It's very adult almost, but okay. All right then. So at this point, I'm completely run out of questions. I mean, your campaign is pretty concise. Your views, and you've got about a year and a half to tackle it, and it doesn't seem like you've got anything in there that's would seem like it would take a tremendously long time to do. But I want to dip in here. So I've got a couple questions from the viewers. If you guys are watching, you've got a question, there's a little plus button down there, or at this point you can go ahead and ask it in the comments and I'll see it. But let's see what you got to say. I think we addressed most of this. The question was, bringing shooters in the game is one of the most important things we do. What can you do within the limitations of your office to help the clubs establish new shooter matches? I guess that's pretty specific. They're asking about whether or not new shooter matches are necessary.
I actually really like that idea. So when we all look at clubs and we understand that there are clubs that maybe are a little bit more intricate in terms of the stage quality and the complexity and movers and whatnot, things that you have to go through. And then you have those matches where maybe things are a little bit more simplistic, but it gets the idea across of what USPSA is without necessarily scaring a first-time competitor with, oh my gosh, I have to do what on this stage? So when I actually started at what someone would consider a new shooter match. It was certainly a more social environment. We only had one bay. So we built two stages. You shot on the left, you shot on the right, and then you went down and scored. And then once that was done, you had about 2 hours at lunch where we basically redesigned the stages and added the classifier, and then you shot that in the afternoon. What I really liked about that was that it was a very easy entry into understanding and shooting USPSA without necessarily the stress of, oh my gosh, we have to get going. Like, we only have so much time. Like, we don't want to be out here all day. It was a very, very easy entry. And I think there really is a place for that where you have a match where a new competitor can show up, not necessarily feel intimidated, but learn just enough about the rules of the game and how to properly, safely shoot a match. And then at some point where they become more comfortable, hey, here's another match where the difficulty comes up a little bit, but it allows them to walk in there knowing, hey, I know what to expect. Like, I'm not going to be scared at some guy with an open gun running at 1,000,000 miles an hour and shooting a stage in 5 seconds that I don't even know how I'm going to do it within 60 seconds.
Sure, and that's a lot less stressful in an environment. One of the things that we've sent people to do around here is to go try Steel Challenge, and that was something that I didn't bring up with you yet about Steel Challenge, and that's a big part of the sport now. So, what is your experience with Steel Challenge? And
so
I should follow that up with the rest of a question, but I got nothing. I ended the end because that was all I had.
I've shot just enough. I've shot just enough Steel Challenge to understand where it is, and while also understanding that I don't know everything there is to know. I mean, I know that there are members out there that have dedicated their entire lives to Steel Challenge. Certainly, we did buy Steel Challenge. We've done some level of integration into USPSA, but there's a lot of great ideas out there that I think we could pursue to essentially provide the same level of organization to Steel Challenge, whether people want it, that we have at USPSA. So, it is an integral part, and I think it's something that has the most room for growth, potentially, not only within the United States, but potentially elsewhere.
Sure. And then I guess we'll talk about multi-gun while we're here. And how do you think that integration is going as far as trying to get clubs to start playing USPSA multi-gun?
My experience with three-gun is almost all under Pete Rensing's UML. That is the dominant form of multi-gun out here on the West Coast. Multi-gun is something that's also very cyclical. So if we talk about, the amount of disposable income that's required for USPSA, and now you add 2 more guns and all the equipment that goes with it, it becomes a real challenge from a disposable income perspective. So that is, multi-gun is still a very important part of practical shooting. Now, how we go about growing that, it's the same way. I think the honest answer is that if you look at how USPSA grows, it's always grassroots, right? Somebody decides they want to create a club, and then they want to start holding matches. That's the same aspect with three-gun. If we want to have more three-gun matches out there, then as an organization, we can certainly look at how to ease the process to be able to run a match. But we can't necessarily be in all 50 states to push three-gun matches all the time.
Sure. So,
and the other, well, actually, I apologize, Bill. I stopped on you there. The other question about three-gun is, is multi-gun necessarily 3 guns, right? Is multi-gun 2-gun? Is multi-gun, rifle pistol, PCC pistol, shotgun pistol? So there's different avenues that we can look at in multi-gun to see, kind of where the market is going and what the members are looking for, and to be able to see how we can best support club matches happening.
So I'm going to move on to the next question. I got a question that was actually pretty well written. For a bunch of shooters, some of these guys write pretty good questions. It says, as the largest region of IPSC and the largest civilian firearms market in the world, is it our job to stay within the lines of IPSC or to help guide IPSC?
Ooh, that is quite a detailed question.
That is a good question. Because right now it seems like most of the focus of people is more along the lines of, should we stay within IPSC's rules? Should we stay close to IPSC rules? And then this question is more like, well, should we be telling them what, it works for us and they should be considering for their rule set?
I think there's areas where USPSA and IPSC interests are aligned. I also understand that USPSA is somewhat separate than IPSC for a reason. So there are certain rule sets that I think we could be aligned with each other, and there's certain things that we can do to help promote, the innovation that we really only get here in the United States. I mean, carry optics is a perfect example. That being said, the example I might think of is, in the United States, if I am shooting carry optics or limited or any division that requires some sort of custom work, it's not very difficult for us to be able to find somebody either in the country or relatively close by to be able to do that sort of custom work. So, for example, Atlas Gunworks is, not that far away from you. The process for you to ship an Atlas limited gun back to them for service, if something were to happen, is relatively painless, right? You just overnight it, or you could UPS ship it with an FFL. And if you look at the rest of the world, that process is significantly more difficult, right? So if you have some guy in Germany who is shooting an infinity gun, and that infinity gun breaks, and he's got to send it back to Brandon, that process is significantly more challenging, which is one of the reasons why production is probably still a very dominant division overseas. You generally tend to see guys shooting what are essentially factory guns. There's not a whole lot of customization that can take place just because of the nature of firearms laws in the rest of the world. But that being said, I think we can provide some guiding we can certainly provide some guiding efforts based on the innovation that occurs here for the rest of the world to adapt, while also being cognizant of, their unique environmental situation. That's at the end of the day, for those of us that do want to participate in ITSA competitions, we're sort of that level of participation above your typical member that says, okay, I want to be able to shoot in ITSA competition, and I'm willing to put in the time and effort and the cost to be able to be compliant with IPSCC rules.
Okay. Now, changing gears hard because that's how these questions go. The question is more like, what is the sponsorship that USPSA is doing for their major matches, or say, let's just use nationals. Is the sponsorship for nationals actually helping the matches? And is there a way to improve that and bringing vendors and stuff into those events?
Well, I think that sponsorship relationship is really a two-way street. Certainly, I don't necessarily need to know the details, but you as a sponsor for matches, in order, there has to be some kind of return on investment. So I would certainly have a conversation with the sponsor and say, okay, in exchange for, whatever level of product that you provide, what is the return I'm giving you in terms of exposure? And that's certainly something that could be included in your discussion that you're having with major match directors of, how do I provide a product that convinces sponsors to be involved?
So anyway, I've had that discussion already. The next one is area matches will fill up in minutes. And there's really only so many people you can fit into a 4-day format. Do you think there's anything to be done to try to improve things for people that want to come and shoot these matches, but they just fill up so daggone quick?
I think our challenge with the area matches is that they're not area limited, right? Anybody, you have national level competitors who want to shoot area matches as part of their requirements. You have local people that want to be able to shoot their area matches because that's really something that they want to experience. I think and we're also limited to the fact that generally an area match will only occur over a long 3-weekend period, so to speak. So without really looking at the quantities and the number of people who want to participate, as well as the restrictions that we have on where we can hold these matches, I'd have to really look at some more data to kind of go, okay, well, maybe this is something we can do to solve that. I mean, having more stages might not necessarily be the answer. Raising area fee costs are certainly not something that I think would be received particularly well. We're really, I guess the best way to look at it is we're essentially in a limited market. We have a lot of demand and not necessarily a whole lot of supply. So how do we go about handling that?
Right. Okay. Well, I don't have any new questions on there. I've only got one question left, but is there anything that you wanted to discuss further for the people that are watching this, as far as your stance and your bid for president of USPSA?
So for all those that are listening to the podcast with Bill and myself, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your Mother's Day schedule to listen to guys just talk on the internet. If you have any questions about my platform or anything that I stand, you can always go to www.keepuspsafun.com. You can also look at my Instagram page. That's where I primarily post all of my information. And at the end of the day, I look forward to just keeping things fair and professional, working on some club guidance so that we can have consistent matches, working on a defined social media platform so we can bring new competitors and clubs into the sport, and most importantly, making sure that we keep USPSA fun and enjoyable for all members and competitors.
Well said. So the last question is one that I've been getting some grief about, but I'm going to ask it anyway because I wanted to know, so I keep asking you guys. And it's basically, if there's like a clear winner, right now there's 4 people running. If there's an obvious clear winner and there's a chance to save that 35 grand from the org, if it's clear that there's a winner and you are trailing way behind and it's obvious you're not in the running, would you concede the vote?
The way that I would look at it is, first off, I really appreciate that everybody actually took the time to vote. I'm sorry that I wasn't necessarily your first choice, but I would certainly like to be your second choice should a runoff take place. When we looking at the financial expenditures, another way to look at it is that financial expenditure worth the investment in ensuring that you have, a leader in place to be able to guide the sport into the future? So the rules do say, you have to have over 50% of the vote. If you don't have 50% of the vote, you did not get the majority of people to actually support you. That means there's still, other people who you weren't their first vote, but they might be your second vote.
Sure. Okay. That's a no. It's okay. I'm just okay. All right, man. Well, thank you very much for coming on. I appreciate your time, and good luck on the race. The elections start May 16th. That's not this coming Monday, but the following Monday. So I'm trying to do a big push. So if you guys are actually made it this far, you're interested in the topic, please don't forget to vote. It'll be hard not to be reminded if you're paying attention to my social media page, but definitely get out there and get that done. And it looks like you would appreciate your vote. Thank you, Yee, for coming on, and I will catch you later.
I'll see you around, Bill. Thanks again for your time.
Take it easy.